Catus Maximus here. This is a quick review of the Lenox Spring Assist Folding Pocket Knife Lenox tools. All these other companies here like DeWalt and Milwaukee have been getting in on the pocket knife game, and so Lenox decided that they couldn't miss out, and so this is the first of the Lenox ones, although I'm sure it's been out for a while. The first one I've actually seen. And in the usual Lenox style, they're going to kind of choose their own route when it comes to knives. There are a variety of these types of knives. There are spring-assisted ones, Tonto tips, standard tips, that type of stuff. And so Lenox kind of decided to go with essentially a middle ground, at least with this model, which is the LXHT 10386. Interesting construction. It has solid nylon body, which is actually pretty heavy duty, with the TPU rubber overmold, and then of course stainless steel liners. It is spring assist using a liner lock. It does have a belt clip, which actually seems pretty rigid. It is held in through the primary crossbolt. What I do like is that it's inset into the plastic to prevent it from wobbling and wanting to get loose. But additionally, they actually bent over a tab which goes into the actual handle, so I like that. That might actually be a belt clip that won't come loose on you. Although it might be nice if they made it so that you could switch it to the other end, just for some people who like to carry them upside down in that direction. Which is something that does, happen, like say on the CRKT, where it's by default. And on the Milwaukee's, one of the big deals about them is that they allow you to reverse the position of the belt clip. So the Lenox, they did a good job, but they could have added another couple points. It is pretty thick, but it is spring-loaded locking. So one interesting thing about this mechanism is this locking mechanism is kind of like this Milwaukee, where it both locks closed and open. You just pull this, and then you press on that, and it snaps out pretty good. I'll do a quick warning. At least in the United States, knife laws can vary dramatically from state to state. And I did want to point out on this Lenox, which is a little bit surprising. Usually in the United States, pocket knives, it's usually about a 3-inch blade length. That's usually the first rule that you really pay attention to, is exactly how long one of these can be. And Lenox is actually, surprisingly enough, decided to go with a 3.5-inch blade on this. If we just measure from there to the very tip, 3.5 inches. So that could be an issue. The second thing is the fact that it is spring-loaded, and besides it being spring-loaded, before I forget, I should say that the liner lock, they did this thing where it's rolled over, and pretty much nobody does that. Very rare. And I'll say that's actually genius. Rolling that line, the edge of that liner lock over a little bit, makes it just so much easier to press. It's actually unbelievable. So of all the things I like about this knife, it would really have to be what they've done with the ergonomics on the liner lock. It's a pretty stiff liner lock, but man, it is just super easy to press in and operate. So the second rules, of course, being spring assisted, that may create an issue in some states, but there's actually how Lenox has done this, and I get confused with the buttons there a little bit, is that it's a two-piece design. So in some regards, it could be considered a push button spring knife, because this mechanism here is actually not just the back of the blade, shaped back of the blade. It is this whole separate little cam in there that rocks back and forth. And so that could be considered a push button because it's a separate moving mechanical element. But I will have to say, oddly enough, this thing actually seems easier to operate in my left hand than it does in my right hand. Just for some reason, just the grip seems a little bit odd when I'm with the belt clip, when I'm trying to open it with my right hand. It's always just seems a little bit more uncomfortable and more difficult, quite frankly. But with my left hand, it just seems so much easier just to grab it and pop it open. So I thought, oddly enough, this actually is a really great design for lefties. As far as the action, it is pretty stiff. It's surprising. I complained about this Milwaukee Tonto spring-loaded because it didn't have any kind of locks besides the liner lock, but it just sits there in your pocket, and if you catch this thumb stud, it's pretty aggressive. It really wants to come out. And a lot of people, I had worried about that when I commented that on my review of this knife. People said that they hadn't had an issue, and this Lenox requires a lot of pressure on this button here in order to get it to flip out. It's surprising. So you could totally take this apart, get rid of that lock, and it would still be just fine, and maybe make it just a little bit more convenient to use when you could just press on that without having to pull this little lever. It's just so awkward in the right hand. Although I will have to say it is a relatively smooth operation. A caveat to this knife is there is a bit of a blade wobble there, and so it would be nice if that were just a little bit tighter. Also, this whole blade design, if we maybe compare to some of these others, there we go. Somebody had commented that you could do that on this non-spring loaded one, and it is true. Do that. We have the wall ball bearing one, which is actually, I'll have to admit, the ball bearings work really well. It's probably the easiest opening knife that does not have a actual spring assist. It's so smooth it almost is like a spring assist. So we have our Tonto blades, we have this, and then, you know, if somebody's wondering about a nicer knife, that would be like a 3.5-inch blade. Here's a CRKT home front, so this is going to be more in the $50 to $70 range. This knife's probably as much as these other 4 knives put together. And so this would be a blade that I really like. Hollow ground, nice and tall, good belly on it. The blade that the Lenox uses is actually surprisingly short. It kind of reminds me of a fishing knife. That'd be the easiest way to put it. You know, a lot of knives you do kind of expect just, you know, a bit taller and a really nice wide belly. The belly is the curved part on the blade. And on the Lenox, it has a really tight belly. So this would be great for opening packaging and all, you know, working with insulation, a variety of situations. It just seems a little bit odd, and it would be a little bit nicer if it was just a bit taller, but I can see why they kind of did that, just because it makes it just a little bit sleeker. The handle really does. The handle is super rigid. It's actually really pretty nice. It's a little bit wider than many other knife handles, but some people may really like the ergonomics, and I do like the touch of them putting on an overmold. You know, we'll see. Test of time will tell how long that actually holds up. But this thing was only 15 bucks, and so really it's not too bad. You know, there are some issues, like when they were grinding the backside of the blade, you can see where they got into the serrations. You're not supposed to grind with serrated blades. You're supposed to stop the plain edge grinding before you get into the backside. The serrations are only supposed to be ground on one side. So there's some quality control issues, but once again, for 15 bucks, it's really surprisingly cheap. So to recap, actually, I think Lenox did a good job for their own take on the knife. It's actually, the mechanism I do like. It is, you know, aggressive. I also like that it is extra safe. But, you know, for the people who are willing to take it apart, you can actually modify that safety. The ergonomics on the liner lock are just superior. The whole opening situation could be made a little bit better. And overall, I like it. Although I think Lenox is kind of hurting themselves a little bit by actually making this a 3.5-inch knife. Just because that could be an issue in a few states, and certainly various areas around the world. And manufacturers do this. The people who, you know, put these products together don't really, you know, spend a whole bunch of time knowing about the specific laws, so they'll do this. And oftentimes these types of things will just be on the product shelves, maybe in places that they shouldn't be, and it's always kind of funny. And I certainly had people comment about that, so that's why I've been talking about it a bunch in the video, because I just don't want to see anybody have any issues. Anyway, cool little Lenox knife, and it's nice to see their entry into the rest of these. I'll have to say, with all the bulk and the extra mechanisms, this thing does have a fair amount of weight. If you like something that actually, you know, feels like it has some mass, this one certainly does. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing, and who's been commenting on my videos. And if you haven't left a comment, please do. Hey, and if you haven't subscribed, please also subscribe as well. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.